Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of three strands is not quickly broken. Now, envy knows no companions. Envy slots everyone into a pecking order and makes us use the people around us and despise the people above us. Envy stops us from loving and valuing others. And in fact, the very virtues and talents which we should admire in other people become to the envious reasons to hate them. Rather than appreciating gifts and talents in others, because their success diminishes us, we end up resenting them. Popularity, that's why one reason why popularity through striving and eminence is hollow and fleeting. We saw earlier in chapter 4, that story about the old foolish king and the wise poor youth that rises to be king and has this sea of people before him. But afterwards the people despised him. The solution to this is to change the way we view people. Not seeing people as above us and below us, but beside us. Not as competitors, but as companions. Not as rivals, but as partners. To foster relationships that are mutually supporting, where we work together and help one another. Companionship, not competition. The second solution to envy is a transformed attitude toward things. We're saying a transformed attitude toward people, companionship, not competition. Secondly, a transformed attitude toward things, an attitude of gratitude, not grasping. Two verses best sum up this solution. Ecclesiastes 5 verse 19. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. And 6 verse 9. Better what the eye sees than the roving of the appetite. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. So the first verse says, every good thing you have is a gift from God. And we're seeing this throughout this book of Ecclesiastes. Every good thing you have is a gift from God. Wealth, possessions, satisfying work, even the ability to enjoy those things, they're gifts given by God. And the second verse there, 6 verse 9, is a bit like our saying, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Better what the eye sees than the roving of the appetite. You're much better off enjoying what you have and being grateful for it than scrambling after what you don't have. Because once you start scrambling, it's very difficult to stop. The ladder goes nowhere because it never ends. No one has every good gift. God gives different gifts to different people. He distributes them very inequitably as well. I certainly don't have every good thing I should like, and no doubt you don't have every good thing you might like. But you do have a choice. Will you live your life appreciating the gifts you do have, or will your life be consumed with craving for the ones you don't? There can be an appropriate grief over good things we don't have, a natural and appropriate grief. I never knew my maternal grandfather. He died of emphysema before I was born. And that is a sad thing. I would like to have known him, to have met him. But envying those who knew all their grandparents, who got to meet all four of them, that's not going to do me much good. Won't bring him back. And it'll just stop me appreciating what I do have. Like the fact that my maternal grandmother, incredibly, is still alive at 99. Now, she has dementia, she can't really remember who I am, but she's content, she's happy, and she has a razor-sharp wit. Now, with Jen and I went to visit her with our first three kids. This was I guess it was a bit over a year ago, and just loved being with her And, we're trying to help her see that these 3 kids, they're her great-grandchildren, and, she's the matriarch of the family, and these great-grandchildren. And there's a 4th on the way. And she turns to us and says, looks at me and says, 4? You do know what causes them, don't you? Hardly remembers who I am, but still she's happy, and still she's got that wit, And so, be thankful for the things you do have, rather than just focusing on the things you don't. If you waste your life pining after what you don't have, the person you hurt most is yourself. Proverbs 14 verse 30, a heart at peace gives life to the body. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Now, God distributes his gifts in varying measure as he sees fit, but materially he has given us materially more than almost every person who's ever lived. Don't get me wrong, even the poor man ought not to envy, but we are so far from being poor. Cultivate an attitude of gratitude, not grasping. Finally, and most importantly, so we need a transformed attitude to people, a transformed attitude to things. Finally, we need a transformed attitude toward God, an attitude of reverence, not presumption. And this is probably the most important part of my talk. There's something terribly self-asserting about the upwardly mobile life. When I'm envious, I devalue others. I push them down. But even worse, when I'm envious, I devalue God. That's why the core solution to a life of envy is to change our attitude toward God. Ecclesiastes 5 verse 7, much dreaming and many words are meaningless, therefore fear God. We need to learn to fear God, to recognise that he's God and we are not, to honour him, to revere him, to worship him. Envy is much more than an unfortunate illness. Envy is also a hideous wickedness. And the real problem with it is that envy is idolatry. We're created to worship God. Someone once called humans the worshipping animals. We can't help but worship something outside of us. We can't help but pour our lives out for something else. And whether or not you're a Christian, you're worshipping something. Maybe it's one of those 3 things we spoke of earlier. Eminence, influence, or affluence. There's something you're pouring your life out in pursuit of. That's the thing you're worshipping. What is it? I said earlier there are 2 reasons why our desire for more is insatiable. First, because there are always more people to envy. And secondly, because our pursuit of more, at its core, is the worship of something that isn't God. Is the worship of something that isn't God. But anything less than God cannot ultimately satisfy you, because you were made for him. You were created to worship the one who is infinite. How can we be satisfied with anything else, anything less? The last point on your outlines there is Jesus and envy. So I'm saying that the cure, how do we tackle envy? We have these transformed attitudes towards people, towards possessions, and towards God himself. The last point on your outline is Jesus and envy. Envy is idolatry, and that's why the supreme expression of envy in history was when we crucified the Lord Jesus Christ. There's this telling aside in the crucifixion account in Mark chapter 15. So in Mark chapter 15 verse 9, Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, asks the chief priests, do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? Do you want me to release for you Jesus? He's innocent. He hasn't done anything wrong. Do you want me to release him? I'll do it. Pilate asked this question, verse 10, knowing it was out of envy that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. God the Son came as a man, but rather than love him and worship him, the people despised him and were filled with envy. The chief priests arrested Jesus because they couldn't stand one who was purer, more perfect, wiser, more honourable, more glorious than they. So they crucified him. Rather than worship the Son of God, humanity envied him and killed him. Yet the great irony of the cross is this, that our most vile act of envy was God's most beautiful gift. Indeed, it was the very gift that saves us from our envy. When Jesus, the perfect, righteous one, was crucified, he wasn't just another victim of humanity's injustice, trampled down by oppression. He was that, but much more. He suffered not just as the victim of our envy, but as the payment for our envy. The ransom price for our idolatry. Christ's death was his supreme act of self-giving. He gave his Son. Nothing more precious that he could give. If you think God's been stingy with you, withholding gifts from you, look at the cross and think again. Jesus died in your place. God gave his Son. Also, you could be forgiven. You know, we've seen that one of the solutions to envy is gratitude, to recognise God has given us good things and be thankful for them. The supreme solution to envy is gratitude for this gift in particular, the gift of God's Son, the death of his Son. In fact, I don't think you can truly know God's generosity unless you receive, or until you receive and thank him for that gift in particular. See, everything else is just playing with the wrapping paper. A Christian has done two things. First, a Christian has recognised that their heart is riddled with envy and idolatry. And secondly, accepted from God the gift of forgiveness and cleansing that come to us only through the death of his Son. That, friends, is the key to a life of contentment. A life when you're released from the grip of envy to enjoy God's good gifts now. But even more importantly, a life where you are freed from the debt of your envy, the punishment due your idolatry, free from guilt, so that you might enjoy God's good gifts forever. And my sincere desire and prayer is that everyone in this room, everyone at our university, everyone joining in this live stream or listening later, everyone would know and receive that freedom. You know, perhaps God's word has touched you today and you know that you haven't been living in freedom from envy. You're still trapped. You're in chains to that idolatry. Why not ask God to break those chains today? If that's you, I want to invite you to join with me in a prayer I'm about to say. It's the kind of prayer for anyone who wants to be a Christian. Anyone who wants freedom, the freedom from envy and the forgiveness that come through God's ultimate gift, the gift of his Son, Jesus. If that's something you'd like to pray, then please join with me. Dear God, you have given me so many good things. I'm sorry for my envy and idolatry. I'm sorry that I've chased after worthless things and failed to worship you. Thank you for sending Jesus to die for me. Please forgive me and free me from my envy. Help me to be content with all the gifts you have given, including the gift of your Son.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, that was great. Cool, yeah, so now here we're going to have some lunch together. If you're somewhere else, you might be having lunch with other people. Let me encourage you, as Martin did, if something that was said today has made you think or question more about who Jesus is, please, follow that up. Or if not, just over lunch today, just talk, ask people what they thought of the talk. I always really, really enjoy having a conversation about what was said, and it always helps me sort of to remember what was said, maybe a little bit better. So I encourage you to do that over lunch. But yeah.
Yes, we're going to have lunch in the hall today because it's super windy. But if you do come to lunch, please socially distance, maybe circles of 8 to 10 throughout the hall, not everyone's in one corner. Just a reminder as well, we need to clean this room before we leave. But training courses, all of them are at 3 o'clock here at Islington Baptist Church. So if you've zoomed in, feel free to make your way here for 3 o'clock. And for the rest of you, you should totally stick around after lunch and come to one. If you haven't signed up, just find somebody, find Jasmine or Bowie or Nick, and we'll put you in a course, or me, or anyone. That'd be great.
Cool. Enjoy the rest of the weeks, and I'll see you around uni.
Sounds good.